Update number 20 on Mario Kart Tour. This tour is about peaches. No, I'm not talking about the fruit, I'm talking about Peach, which is a princess. Wait, what? Oh my god. Yes, this tour is named after Princess Peach after the Yoshi, Hammer Bro, and Baby Rosalina tours. Sorry that the camera shakes. I was excited that Peach Tour is named after Princess Peach. Let's get back to the update. As of June 17, 2020, the character, Wedding Peach, is added to the game. But she's tour-exclusive characters. That makes a total of 84 characters, 85 if Gold Mario so far, making it the Mario game with the most playable characters still. The tour-exclusive characters went up from 35 to 36. Now, for the Peach Tour, it's going on until June 30, 2020. The other characters are still not tour-exclusive, meaning that you could get them at any time, mostly in the shop, but sometimes in the pipe, or sometimes as rubies. Remember that gold passes are the gold licenses where you can get gold gifts, 200 CCs, and earn badges from gold challenges. Remember that the Gold Pass 2-week free trial is only available for first-time subscribers. Remember that the 2-week free trial will not cost money, but after the 2-week free trial, it will cost money, unless your subscription cancels, and when canceling the Gold Pass free trial subscription, the tour gifts that contains the Gold Pass, it won't be obtainable anymore, but any characters you got during the Gold Pass will be kept, even canceling the Gold Pass subscription. Austin was counting wrong. 35 of them are tour exclusive previously, now 36 of them are still tour exclusive, 46 of them are not. He has 31 characters so far in this order: Toad, Peach, Luigi, Donkey Kong, Dry Bones, Roy Koopa, Pit Crew Toad, Daisy, Baby Peach, Baby Daisy, Shy Guy, Iggy Koopa, Koopa Troopa, Bowser, Baby Rosalina, Ludwig von Koopa, Baby Mario, Morton Koopa, Lemmy Koopa, Diddy Kong, Larry Koopa, Wendy O Koopa, Black Shy Guy, Fire Bro, Hammer Bro, Dry Bowser, Mario, Bomberang Bro, Pauline, Toadette, and Yoshi. He need 21 more characters to go, but Ice Mario, Birdo, Light Blue Birdo, Yellow Birdo, Red Yoshi, King Boo, Black Shy Guy, Pink Shy Guy, Frowning Red Koopa, Hammer Bro, Ice Bro, Fire Bro, Boomerang Bro, and Monty Mole are not in the daily selects. Also, more items were added as of the cooking tour, but they all comes at an increased cost and referred to named additional items. As of the cooking tour, Luigi, Rosalina, Baby Luigi, Pit Crew Toad, Lakitu, Bowser Jr., Wario, Waluigi, King Boo, and Pauline are on daily selects. Isn't it great? All of the previous tours, though, have offered 2 new characters that can be acquired. First, New York Tour, September 25, 2019 to October 8, 2019. Second, Tokyo Tour, October 9, 2019 to October 22, 2019. Third, Halloween Tour, October 23, 2019 to November 5, 2019. Fourth, Paris Tour, November 6, 2019 to November 19, 2019. Fifth, Winter Tour, November 20, 2019 to December 3, 2019. Sixth, London Tour, December 4, 2019 to December 17, 2019. Seventh, Holiday Tour, December 18, 2019 to December 31, 2019. Eighth, New Year's Tour, January 1, 2020 to January 14, 2020. Ninth, Ice Tour, January 15, 2020 to January 28, 2020. 10th, Valentine's Tour, January 29, 2020 to February 11, 2020. 11th, Vancouver Tour, February 12, 2020 to February 25, 2020. 12th, Mario Brothers Tour, February 26, 2020 to March 10, 2020. 13th, Baby Rosalina Tour, March 11, 2020 to March 24, 2020. 14th, Hammer Bro Tour, March 25, 2020 to April 7, 2020. 15th, Yoshi Tour, April 8, 2020 to April 21, 2020. 16th, Trick Tour, April 22, 2020 to May 5, 2020. 17th, Flower Tour, May 6, 2020 to May 19, 2020. 18th, Jungle Tour, May 20, 2020 to June 2, 2020. 19th, Cooking Tour, June 3, 2020 to June 16, 2020. 20th, Peach Tour, June 17, 2020 to June 30, 2020. Remember that when these tours are over, Mario Kart Tour app will not be discontinued anytime soon. Remember that when the current tour ends, like these tour gifts would not be obtainable, but not for what it got in Spotlight drivers, karts, and gliders may reappear in the pipe. Remember that all 50 differences are confirmed in Mario Kart Tour, and remember that this game had references as follows. 1. Donkey Kong released on July 9, 1981 in Japan, and July 31, 1981 in North America. Portions of this game can be seen in Times Square screens in New York Minute 1 and New York Minute 2. The clothing colors of Mario Classic reference Mario's original design from this game. 2. Super Mario Bros. Released on September 13, 1985 in Japan, October 18, 1985 in the US, May 15, 1987 in Europe, and July 1, 1987 in Australia. The 8-bit jumping Mario glider uses Mario's jumping sprite from this game. The game's Japanese logo appears on the Super 1 cart. 3. Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels released on June 3, 1986. The clothing colors of Luigi Classic reference Luigi's artwork from this game. 4. Super Mario Bros. 3 released on October 23, 1988 in Japan, February 12, 1990 in North America, and August 29, 1991 in the PAL region. Boomerang Bro and a Fire Bro appear as playable characters. 5. Super Mario Kart released on August 27, 1992 in Japan, September 1, 1992 in North America, and January 21, 1993 in Europe. Mario Circuit 1, Ghost Valley 1, Mario Circuit 2, Mario Circuit 3, Choco Island 2, Vanilla Lake 1, and Rainbow Road appear as returning courses. The tires resembling the tires from this game returns as the pipe frames assigned tires, as well as other certain karts with these tires. Also, one of Princess Peach's artworks from this game is reused for the dash panel plus special skill icon. 6. Donkey Kong Country released on November 21, 1994 in the US, November 24, 1994 in Europe, and November 26, 1994 in Japan. Donkey Kong Country, a special video promoting the Rambi Rider as a commemorative kart for the Jungle Tour was released, using clips from the opening and gameplay. 7. Mario Kart 64 released on December 14, 1996 in Japan, February 10, 1997 in North America, and June 24, 1997 in Europe. Koopa Troopa Beach, Calamari Desert, and Fraps Snowland appear as returning courses. The results theme is an arrangement of the winning results theme from this game. 8. Mario Kart Super Circuit released on July 21, 2001 in Japan, August 27, 2001 in North America, September 7, 2001 in Australia, and September 14, 2001 in Europe. Bowser Castle 1 appears as a returning course. 9. Mario Kart Double Dash released on November 7, 2003 in Japan, November 14, 2003 in Europe, November 17, 2003 in North America, and November 19, 2003 in Australia. Special items return. Yoshi's Circuit and Dino Dino Jungle appear as returning courses. The Turbo Yoshi, Turbo Birdo, Koopa Dasher, Parawing, Bullet Blaster, and DK Jumbo return as karts. Birdo's voice clips are reused. 10. Mario Party 6 released on November 18, 2004 in Japan, December 6, 2004 in the US, March 18, 2005 in Europe, and September 15, 2005 in Australia. The clothing colors of Luigi Classic reference Luigi's artwork from this game. In addition to this, Classic Mario's and Classic Luigi's artwork are based on Mario and Luigi's profile artworks from this game. 11. Mario Kart DS released on November 14, 2005 in North America, November 17, 2005 in Australia, November 25, 2005 in Europe, December 8, 2005 in Japan, and April 5, 2007 in South Korea. Luigi's Mansion, Waluigi Pinball, and DK Pass appear as returning courses. The Poltergust 4000, Streamliner, Royale, and Mushmallow return as karts. Challenges with unique objectives return as the fourth and final race in every cup. 12. Super Mario Strikers released on November 18, 2005 in Europe, December 5, 2005 in North America, January 19, 2006 in Japan, and April 6, 2006 inches Australia. Some of Hammer Bros voice clips are reused from this game. 13 Mario Party 8 released on May 29, 2007 inches North America, June 22, 2007 inches Europe, July 19, 2007 inches Australia, July 26, 2007 inches Japan, and August 3, 2007 in the United Kingdom. Dry Bones' artwork is reused from this game. In addition, Hammer Bros artwork, as well as some of his voice clips, are reused from this game. 14 Super Mario Galaxy released on November 1, 2007 inches Japan, November 12, 2007 in the US, November 16, 2007 inches Europe, November 29, 2007 inches Australia, February 1, 2008 inches South Africa, July 12, 2008 inches Hong Kong and Taiwan, and September 4, 2008 inches South Korea. Ice Mario appears as a playable variant. Bowser Jr.'s artwork is reused from this game. 15 Mario Party DS released on November 8, 2007 inches Japan and Taiwan, November 19, 2007 in the US, November 23, 2007 inches Europe, December 6, 2007 inches Australia, and May 22, 2008 inches South Korea. Diddy Kong's artwork is reused from this game. 16 Mario Kart Wii released on April 10, 2008 inches Japan, April 11, 2008 inches Europe, April 24, 2008 inches Australia, and April 27, 2008 inches North America. The Wild Wing, Day Tripper, Super Blooper, Cheap Charger, and Flame Flyer return as carts. The jingle that plays when earning a high-end cart, glider, racer, or level boost ticket is recreated. Diddy Kong and Birdo's voice clips are reused. Also, the place up and the place down sound effect is reused. 17 Mario Super Sluggers released on June 19, 2008 inches Japan, July 12, 2008 inches Taiwan, and August 25, 2008 in the US. Black Shy Guy and Pink Shy Guy's artworks are based off of Shy Guy's artwork from this game. 18 New Super Mario Bros. Wii released on November 11, 2009 inches Australia, November 15, 2009 inches North America, November 20, 2009 inches Europe, December 3, 2009 inches Japan, July 3, 2010 inches Taiwan and Hong Kong, and August 7, 2010 inches South Korea. Peach's artwork is reused from this game. Penguin Luigi appears as a playable character. In addition, Iggy's artwork is based off his artwork from this game, albeit without the magic coming from his wand. 19 Mario Kart 7 released on December 1, 2011 inches Japan, December 2, 2011 inches Europe, December 3, 2011 inches Australia, and December 4, 2011 inches North America. Toad Circuit, Daisy Hills, Cheap Lagoon, Shy Guy Bazaar, Mario Circuit, Rock Mountain, Neo Bowser City and Rainbow Road appear as returning courses. SNES Rainbow Road retains its retro course design from this game. The Birthday Girl, Soda Jet, Cloud 9, Bumble 5, Zucchini, Bruiser, and Blue 7 return as carts, and the Barrel Train retains its design from this game. The Swooper returns as a glider. Various tire parts return retaining their design, which are only assigned to certain carts. The Lucky 7 reappears as a special item. The rankings screen uses the theme used in local multiplayer from this game. Metal Mario's voice clips are reused. Lakitu and Metal Mario's artworks are also reused from this game. 20 Mario Party 9 released on March 2, 2012 inches Europe, March 8, 2012 inches Australia, March 11, 2012 in the US, April 26, 2012 inches Japan, June 29, 2012 inches Taiwan and Hong Kong, and April 11, 2013 inches South Korea. Birdo's artwork is reused from this game. Light blue Birdo's artwork and yellow Birdo's artworks are based off of Birdo's artwork. 21 Super Mario 3D World released on November 21, 2013 inches Japan, November 22, 2013 in the US, November 26, 2013 inches Brazil, November 29, 2013 inches Europe, and November 30, 2013 inches Australia. The artwork for the Double Cherry is reused from this game for the Tropical Grocery badge. 22 Mario Party, Island Tour released on November 22, 2013 in the US, January 10, 2014 inches Hong Kong and Taiwan, January 17, 2014 inches Europe, January 18, 2014 inches Australia, and March 20, 2014 inches Japan and South Korea. Luigi's artwork is reused from this game. 23. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze released on February 13, 2014 inches Japan, February 21, 2014 in the US and Europe, February 22, 2014 inches Australia, and March 20, 2014 inches Brazil. Dixie Kong and Funky Kong's artworks are reused from this game. Dixie Kong's emblem is derived from the Dixie Kong barrel's design in this game. 24. Mario Kart 8 released on May 29, 2014 inches Japan, May 30, 2014 inches North America, and in Europe, and May 31, 2014 inches Australia. Many characters, animations and voice clips are reused from this game. Metal Mario's voice clips are reused exclusively for Gold Mario. Yoshi's Circuit retains its retro course design from this game. The flying train scene in N64 Rainbow Road returns in the Ring Race Challenge set in 3DS Rainbow Road. The Mach 8, Badwagon, Biddy-Buggy, Landship, Circuit Special, P-Wing, and Prancer return as carts, and the Pipe Frame and B-Dasher retains its design from this game. The Parafoil, Peach Parasol, Flower Glider, Wario Wing, and Cloud Glider return as gliders, retaining their design from this game. Various tire parts return retaining their design. The Boomerang Flower and Super Horn return as items. The courses from this game are referenced in advertisements and badges, including Toad Harbor, Sunshine Airport, and Mount Wario. The designs of the icons for the Mushroom Cup, the Flower Cup, the Star Cup, the Shell Cup, and the Lightning Cup are reused from this game as badges. 25. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker released on November 13, 2014 inches Japan, December 5, 2014 in the US, January 2, 2015 inches Europe, January 3, 2015 inches Australia, and January 9, 2015 inches Italy. The Clanky card is based off the mine cart from this game. 26. Mario Party 10 released on March 12, 2015 inches Japan, March 20, 2015 in the US and Europe, and March 21, 2015 inches Australia. Yoshi, Bowser, Toad, Waluigi, and Toadette's artworks are reused from this game. Red Yoshi's artwork is based off of Yoshi's artwork from this game. 27. Super Mario Maker released on September 20, 2015 inches Japan, September 11, 2015 in the US and Europe, and September 12, 2015 inches Australia. Builder Mario appears as playable variant. 28. Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games released on June 25, 2016 inches Japan, June 24, 2016 in the US, Brazil, and Europe, and June 25, 2016 inches Australia. Nabbit's emblem is reused from this game as part of the Racer Soda Grape badge. 29. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe released on April 28, 2017, the third level Mini Turbo Boost, Ultra Mini Turbo, returns. The Koopa Clown retains its design from this game. King Boo head icon is recycled from this game. 30. Super Mario Odyssey released on October 27, 2017 inches Japan, the US, Europe, Australia, and Hong Kong, and December 1, 2017 inches South Korea and Taiwan. Mario Musician, Mario Santa, Mario Classic, and Mario Happy use Mario's musician outfit, Santa outfit, Classic outfit, and Happy outfit respectively from this game. Peach Wedding uses Wedding Peach in the game. The Yellow Taxi is based on the taxis from this game. Pauline's voice clips reference her singing from this game. Peach Vacation and Peach Wintertime use her post-game tourist outfits from this game. The Red and Gold Roving Racers appear as playable characters as Red Koopa Fronting and Gold Koopa Fronting respectively. 31. Mario Party, the Top 100 released on November 10, 2017 in the US, December 22, 2017 inches Europe and Australia, and December 28, 2017 inches Japan, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Rosalina and Wario's artworks are reused from this game. 32. Mario Tennis Aces released on June 22, 2018 worldwide. Pauline's card emblem is reused from this game. 33. Super Mario Party released on October 5, 2018 worldwide. Donkey Kong's artwork is reused from this game. Monty Mole appears to be playable. 34. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe released on January 11, 2019 inches Japan, the US, Europe, Australia, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and December 10, 2019 inches China Pachette appears as a playable character with her emblem being a Super Crown. 35 Super Mario Maker 2 released on June 28, 2019 worldwide Builder Toad appears as playable variant. And 36 Luigi's Mansion 3 released on October 31, 2019 worldwide King Boo. Luigi's Mansion uses King Boo's design from this game. We got more events for the whole cooking tour that's going on. Last time, on June 3, 2020, severe cyclonic storm Nisarga makes landfall south of Mumbai. On June 4, 2020 Happy Fair with Baymax event begins at Tokyo Disneyland. On June 5, 2020 a movie, Wonder Woman, releases. On June 6, 2020, the government of National Accord says its forces have taken full control of Bani Walid, including Bani Walid Airport, and Al Arabian without facing any resistance, as Libyan National Army forces abandon their positions. On June 7, 2020, the number of worldwide cases of COVID-19 surpasses 7 million. On June 8, 2020, Turkish-backed GNA forces enter the Libyan National Army-held city of Sirte and capture 2 districts. On June 9, 2020, the American reality TV program Cops is cancelled after 31 years amid police brutality. Protests and insurgents destroy a village in Gubiel, Borno State, Nigeria, killing 81 residents. On June 10, 2020, A&E cancels live PD after police brutality. Protests in the United States surpasses 2 million cases of COVID-19, the first country in the world to do so. On June 11, 2020, U.S. President Donald Trump authorizes sanctions against the International Criminal Court in retaliation for their investigation into potential war crimes by U.S. officials. On June 12, 2020 Candyman releases. On June 13, 2020, ISWAP kills over 20 soldiers and 40 civilians in attacks in Munyuno and Gonzai in Borno, Nigeria. On June 14, 2020 19 people are killed and more than 172 injured after a liquefied gas tanker exploded on a Chinese highway near the city of Wenling. On June 15, 2020, the United Nations removed Saudi Arabia from a blacklist of countries accused of killing or maiming children, following a sustained significant decrease in airstrikes. On June 16, 2020, the total cases surpass 8 million worldwide, as infections surge across the Americas and China grapples with fresh outbreaks, and 20 Indian soldiers and an unknown number of Chinese forces have been killed in a clash in Ladakh in the disputed Kashmir region, amid rising tensions between the two countries. Local media reported that the Indian soldiers were beaten to death, and the Indian Army claims no shots were fired. On June 17, 2020, Bristow's President and Chief Executive Officer, Chris Bradshaw, presented and participated at the 2020 J.P. Morgan Energy, Power and Renewables Conference. Update number 21 should come after the Peach Tour, which is on July 1, 2020. Oh, and just an important note, a solar eclipse is going to occur on June 21, 2020. After that, the solar eclipse is going to next occur on December 14, 2020. After that, these solar eclipses are going to occur next. The solar eclipse on June 10, 2021. The solar eclipse on December 4, 2021, the solar eclipse on April 30, 2022, the solar eclipse on October 25, 2022, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2023, the solar eclipse on October 14, 2023, the solar eclipse on April 8, 2024, the solar eclipse on October 2, 2024, the solar eclipse on March 29, 2025, the solar eclipse on September 21, 2025, the solar eclipse on February 17, 2026, the solar eclipse on August 12, 2026, the solar eclipse on February 6, 2027, the solar eclipse on August 2, 2027, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2028, the solar eclipse on July 22, 2028, the solar eclipse on January 14, 2029, the solar eclipse on June 12, 2029, the solar eclipse on July 11, 2029, the solar eclipse on December 5, 2029, the solar eclipse on June 1, 2030, the solar eclipse on November 25, 2030, the solar eclipse on May 21, 2031, the solar eclipse on November 14, 2031, the solar eclipse on May 9, 2032, the solar eclipse on November 3, 2032, the solar eclipse on March 30, 2033, the solar eclipse on September 23, 2033, the solar eclipse on March 20, 2034, the solar eclipse on September 12, 2034, the solar eclipse on March 9, 2035, the solar eclipse on September 2, 2035, the solar eclipse on February 27, 2036, the solar eclipse on July 23, 2036, the solar eclipse on August 21, 2036, the solar eclipse on January 16, 2037, the solar eclipse on July 13, 2037, the solar eclipse on January 5, 2038, the solar eclipse on July 2, 2038, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2038, the solar eclipse on June 21, 2039, the solar eclipse on December 15, 2039, the solar eclipse on May 11, 2040, the solar eclipse on November 4, 2040, the solar eclipse on April 30, 2041, the solar eclipse on October 25, 2041, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2042, the solar eclipse on October 14, 2042, the solar eclipse on April 9, 2043, the solar eclipse on October 3, 2043, the solar eclipse on February 28, 2044, the solar eclipse on August 23, 2044, the solar eclipse on February 16, 2045, the solar eclipse on August 12, 2045, the solar eclipse on February 5, 2046, the solar eclipse on August 2, 2046, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2047, the solar eclipse on June 23, 2047, the solar eclipse on July 22, 2047, the solar eclipse on December 16, 2047, the solar eclipse on June 11, 2048, the solar eclipse on December 5, 2048, the solar eclipse on May 31, 2049, the solar eclipse on November 25, 2049, the solar eclipse on May 20, 2050, the solar eclipse on November 14, 2050, the solar eclipse on April 11, 2051, the solar eclipse on October 4, 2051, the solar eclipse on March 30, 2052, the solar eclipse on September 22, 2052, the solar eclipse on March 20, 2053, the solar eclipse on September 12, 2053, the solar eclipse on March 9, 2054, the solar eclipse on August 3, 2054, the solar eclipse on September 2, 2054, the solar eclipse on January 27, 2055, the solar eclipse on July 24, 2055, the solar eclipse on January 16, 2056, the solar eclipse on July 12, 2056, the solar eclipse on January 5, 2057, the solar eclipse on July 1, 2057, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2057, the solar eclipse on May 22, 2058, the solar eclipse on June 21, 2058, the solar eclipse on November 16, 2058, the solar eclipse on May 11, 2059, the solar eclipse on November 5, 2059, the solar eclipse on April 30, 2060, the solar eclipse on October 24, 2060, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2061, the solar eclipse on October 13, 2061, the solar eclipse on March 11, 2062, the solar eclipse on September 3, 2062, the solar eclipse on February 28, 2063, the solar eclipse on August 24, 2063, the solar eclipse on February 17, 2064, the solar eclipse on August 12, 2064, the solar eclipse on February 5, 2065, the solar eclipse on July 3, 2065, the solar eclipse on August 2, 2065, the solar eclipse on December 27, 2065, the solar eclipse on June 22, 2066, the solar eclipse on December 17, 2066, the solar eclipse on June 11, 2067, the solar eclipse on December 6, 2067, the solar eclipse on May 31, 2068, the solar eclipse on November 24, 2068, the solar eclipse on April 21, 2069, the solar eclipse on May 20, 2069, the solar eclipse on October 15, 2069, the solar eclipse on April 11, 2070, the solar eclipse on October 4, 2070, the solar eclipse on March 31, 2071, the solar eclipse on September 23, 2071, the solar eclipse on March 19, 2072, the solar eclipse on September 12, 2072, The solar eclipse on February 7, 2073. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2073. The solar eclipse on January 27, 2074. The solar eclipse on July 24, 2074. The solar eclipse on January 16, 2075. The solar eclipse on July 13, 2075. The solar eclipse on January 6, 2076. The solar eclipse on June 1, 2076. The solar eclipse on July 1, 2076. The solar eclipse on November 26, 2076. The solar eclipse on May 22, 2077. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2077. The solar eclipse on May 11, 2078. The solar eclipse on November 4, 2078. The solar eclipse on May 1, 2079. The solar eclipse on October 24, 2079. The solar eclipse on March 21, 2080. The solar eclipse on September 13, 2080. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2081. The solar eclipse on September 3, 2081. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2082. The solar eclipse on August 24, 2082. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2083. The solar eclipse on July 15, 2083. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2083. The solar eclipse on January 7, 2084. The solar eclipse on July 3, 2084. The solar eclipse on December 27, 2084. The solar eclipse on June 22, 2085. The solar eclipse on December 16, 2085. The solar eclipse on June 11, 2086. The solar eclipse on December 6, 2086. The solar eclipse on May 2, 2087. The solar eclipse on June 1, 2087. The solar eclipse on October 26, 2087. The solar eclipse on April 21, 2088. The solar eclipse on October 14, 2088. The solar eclipse on April 10, 2089. The solar eclipse on October 4, 2089. The solar eclipse on March 31, 2090. The solar eclipse on September 23, 2090. The solar eclipse on February 18, 2091. The solar eclipse on August 15, 2091. The solar eclipse on February 7, 2092. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2092. The solar eclipse on January 27, 2093. The solar eclipse on July 23, 2093. The solar eclipse on January 16, 2094. The solar eclipse on June 13, 2094. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2094. The solar eclipse on December 7, 2094. The solar eclipse on June 2, 2095. The solar eclipse on November 27, 2095. The solar eclipse on May 22, 2096. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2096. The solar eclipse on May 11, 2097. The solar eclipse on November 4, 2097. The solar eclipse on April 1, 2098. The solar eclipse on September 25, 2098. The solar eclipse on October 24, 2098. The solar eclipse on March 21, 2099. The solar eclipse on September 14, 2099. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2100. The solar eclipse on September 4, 2100. The solar eclipse on February 28, 2101. The solar eclipse on August 24, 2101. The solar eclipse on January 19, 2102. The solar eclipse on July 15, 2102. The solar eclipse on January 8, 2103. The solar eclipse on July 4, 2103. The solar eclipse on December 29, 2103. The solar eclipse on June 22, 2104. The solar eclipse on December 17, 2104. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2105. The solar eclipse on June 12, 2105. The solar eclipse on November 6, 2105. The solar eclipse on May 3, 2106. The solar eclipse on October 26, 2106. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2107. The solar eclipse on October 16, 2107. The solar eclipse on April 11, 2108. The solar eclipse on October 5, 2108. The solar eclipse on March 1, 2109. The solar eclipse on August 26, 2109. The solar eclipse on February 18, 2110. The solar eclipse on August 15, 2110. The solar eclipse on February 8, 2111. The solar eclipse on August 4, 2111. The solar eclipse on January 29, 2112. The solar eclipse on June 24, 2112. The solar eclipse on July 23, 2112. The solar eclipse on December 19, 2112. The solar eclipse on June 13, 2113. The solar eclipse on December 8, 2113. The solar eclipse on June 3, 2114. The solar eclipse on November 27, 2114. The solar eclipse on May 24, 2115. The solar eclipse on November 16, 2115. The solar eclipse on April 13, 2116. The solar eclipse on October 6, 2116. The solar eclipse on November 4, 2116. The solar eclipse on April 2, 2117. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2117. The solar eclipse on March 22, 2118. The solar eclipse on September 15, 2118. The solar eclipse on March 11, 2119. The solar eclipse on September 5, 2119. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2120. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2120. The solar eclipse on January 19, 2121. The solar eclipse on July 14, 2121. The solar eclipse on January 8, 2122. The solar eclipse on July 4, 2122. The solar eclipse on December 28, 2122. The solar eclipse on May 25, 2123. The solar eclipse on June 23, 2123. The solar eclipse on November 18, 2123. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2124. The solar eclipse on November 6, 2124. The solar eclipse on May 3, 2125. The solar eclipse on October 26, 2125. The solar eclipse on April 22, 2126. The solar eclipse on October 16, 2126. The solar eclipse on March 13, 2127. The solar eclipse on September 6, 2127. The solar eclipse on March 1, 2128. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2128. The solar eclipse on February 18, 2129. The solar eclipse on August 15, 2129. The solar eclipse on February 8, 2130. The solar eclipse on August 4, 2130. The solar eclipse on December 30, 2130. The solar eclipse on June 25, 2131. The solar eclipse on December 19, 2131. The solar eclipse on June 13, 2132. The solar eclipse on December 7, 2132. The solar eclipse on June 3, 2133. The solar eclipse on November 26, 2133. The solar eclipse on April 24, 2134. The solar eclipse on May 23, 2134. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2134. The solar eclipse on November 16, 2134. The solar eclipse on April 13, 2135. The solar eclipse on October 7, 2135. The solar eclipse on April 1, 2136. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2136. The solar eclipse on March 21, 2137. The solar eclipse on September 15, 2137. The solar eclipse on February 9, 2138. The solar eclipse on August 5, 2138. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2139. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2139. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2140. The solar eclipse on July 14, 2140. The solar eclipse on January 8, 2141. The solar eclipse on June 4, 2141. The solar eclipse on July 3, 2141. The solar eclipse on November 28, 2141. The solar eclipse on May 25, 2142. The solar eclipse on November 17, 2142. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2143. The solar eclipse on November 7, 2143. The solar eclipse on May 3, 2144. The solar eclipse on October 26, 2144. The solar eclipse on March 23, 2145. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2145. The solar eclipse on October 16, 2145. The solar eclipse on March 12, 2146. The solar eclipse on September 6, 2146. The solar eclipse on March 2, 2147. The solar eclipse on August 26, 2147. The solar eclipse on February 19, 2148. The solar eclipse on August 14, 2148. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2149. The solar eclipse on July 5, 2149. The solar eclipse on December 30, 2149. The solar eclipse on June 25, 2150. The solar eclipse on December 19, 2150. The solar eclipse on June 14, 2151. The solar eclipse on December 8, 2151. The solar eclipse on May 4, 2152. The solar eclipse on June 3, 2152. The solar eclipse on October 28, 2152. The solar eclipse on November 26, 2152. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2153. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2153. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2154. The solar eclipse on October 7, 2154. The solar eclipse on April 2, 2155. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2155. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2156. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2156. The solar eclipse on February 9, 2157. The solar eclipse on August 5, 2157. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2158. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2158. The solar eclipse on January 19, 2159. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2159. The solar eclipse on July 15, 2159. The solar eclipse on December 9, 2159. The solar eclipse on June 4, 2160. The solar eclipse on November 27, 2160. The solar eclipse on May 25, 2161. The solar eclipse on November 17, 2161. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2162. The solar eclipse on November 7, 2162. The solar eclipse on April 3, 2163. The solar eclipse on September 28, 2163. The solar eclipse on October 27, 2163. The solar eclipse on March 23, 2164. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2164. The solar eclipse on March 12, 2165. The solar eclipse on September 5, 2165. The solar eclipse on March 2, 2166. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2166. The solar eclipse on January 21, 2167. The solar eclipse on July 16, 2167. The solar eclipse on January 10, 2168. The solar eclipse on July 5, 2168. The solar eclipse on December 29, 2168. The solar eclipse on June 25, 2169. The solar eclipse on December 18, 2169. The solar eclipse on May 16, 2170. The solar eclipse on June 14, 2170. The solar eclipse on November 8, 2170. The solar eclipse on December 7, 2170. The solar eclipse on May 5, 2171. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2171. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2172. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2172. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2173. The solar eclipse on October 7, 2173. The solar eclipse on March 3, 2174. The solar eclipse on April 1, 2174. The solar eclipse on August 27, 2174. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2175. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2175. The solar eclipse on February 10, 2176. The solar eclipse on August 4, 2176. The solar eclipse on January 29, 2177. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2177. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2177. The solar eclipse on December 20, 2177. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2178. The solar eclipse on December 9, 2178. The solar eclipse on June 5, 2179. The solar eclipse on November 28, 2179. The solar eclipse on May 24, 2180. The solar eclipse on November 17, 2180. The solar eclipse on April 14, 2181. The solar eclipse on May 13, 2181. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2181. The solar eclipse on November 7, 2181. The solar eclipse on April 3, 2182. The solar eclipse on September 27, 2182. The solar eclipse on March 23, 2183. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2183. The solar eclipse on March 12, 2184. The solar eclipse on September 4, 2184. The solar eclipse on January 31, 2185. The solar eclipse on July 26, 2185. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2186. The solar eclipse on July 16, 2186. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2187. The solar eclipse on July 6, 2187. The solar eclipse on December 29, 2187. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2188. The solar eclipse on June 24, 2188. The solar eclipse on November 18, 2188. The solar eclipse on December 18, 2188. The solar eclipse on May 15, 2189. The solar eclipse on November 8, 2189. The solar eclipse on May 4, 2190. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2190. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2191. The solar eclipse on October 18, 2191. The solar eclipse on March 13, 2192. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2192. The solar eclipse on September 6, 2192. The solar eclipse on March 3, 2193. The solar eclipse on August 26, 2193. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2194. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2194. The solar eclipse on February 10, 2195. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2195. The solar eclipse on August 5, 2195. The solar eclipse on December 31, 2195. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2196. The solar eclipse on December 19, 2196. The solar eclipse on June 15, 2197. The solar eclipse on December 9, 2197. The solar eclipse on June 4, 2198. The solar eclipse on November 28, 2198. The solar eclipse on April 25, 2199. The solar eclipse on May 24, 2199. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2199. The solar eclipse on November 18, 2199. The solar eclipse on April 14, 2200. The solar eclipse on October 9, 2200. The solar eclipse on April 4, 2201. The solar eclipse on September 28, 2201. The solar eclipse on March 24, 2202. The solar eclipse on September 17, 2202. The solar eclipse on February 12, 2203. The solar eclipse on August 8, 2203. The solar eclipse on September 6, 2203. The solar eclipse on February 2, 2204. The solar eclipse on July 27, 2204. The solar eclipse on January 21, 2205. The solar eclipse on July 17, 2205. The solar eclipse on January 10, 2206. The solar eclipse on June 7, 2206. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2206. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2206. The solar eclipse on December 30, 2206. The solar eclipse on May 27, 2207. The solar eclipse on November 20, 2207. The solar eclipse on May 15, 2208. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2208. The solar eclipse on May 5, 2209. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2209. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2210. The solar eclipse on April 24, 2210. The solar eclipse on September 18, 2210. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2211. The solar eclipse on September 8, 2211. The solar eclipse on March 4, 2212. The solar eclipse on August 27, 2212. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2213. The solar eclipse on August 17, 2213. The solar eclipse on January 11, 2214. The solar eclipse on July 8, 2214. The solar eclipse on January 1, 2215. The solar eclipse on June 28, 2215. The solar eclipse on December 21, 2215. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2216. The solar eclipse on December 10, 2216. The solar eclipse on May 6, 2217. The solar eclipse on June 5, 2217. The solar eclipse on October 31, 2217. The solar eclipse on November 29, 2217. The solar eclipse on April 25, 2218. The solar eclipse on October 20, 2218. The solar eclipse on April 15, 2219. The solar eclipse on October 9, 2219. The solar eclipse on April 4, 2220. The solar eclipse on September 27, 2220. The solar eclipse on February 23, 2221. The solar eclipse on August 18, 2221. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2221. The solar eclipse on February 12, 2222. The solar eclipse on August 8, 2222. The solar eclipse on February 1, 2223. The solar eclipse on July 28, 2223. The solar eclipse on January 21, 2224. The solar eclipse on July 17, 2224. The solar eclipse on December 11, 2224. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2225. The solar eclipse on June 6, 2225. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2225. The solar eclipse on May 27, 2226. The solar eclipse on November 20, 2226. The solar eclipse on May 16, 2227. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2227. The solar eclipse on April 5, 2228. The solar eclipse on May 4, 2228. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2228. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2228. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2229. The solar eclipse on September 18, 2229. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2230. The solar eclipse on September 7, 2230. The solar eclipse on March 4, 2231. The solar eclipse on August 28, 2231. The solar eclipse on January 23, 2232. The solar eclipse on July 18, 2232. The solar eclipse on January 11, 2233. The solar eclipse on July 8, 2233. The solar eclipse on December 31, 2233. The solar eclipse on June 27, 2234. The solar eclipse on December 21, 2234. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2235. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2235. The solar eclipse on November 11, 2235. The solar eclipse on December 11, 2235. The solar eclipse on May 6, 2236. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2236. The solar eclipse on April 25, 2237. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2237. The solar eclipse on April 15, 2238. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2238. The solar eclipse on March 6, 2239. The solar eclipse on August 29, 2239. The solar eclipse on September 28, 2239. The solar eclipse on February 23, 2240. The solar eclipse on August 18, 2240. The solar eclipse on February 11, 2241. The solar eclipse on August 8, 2241. The solar eclipse on January 31, 2242. The solar eclipse on July 28, 2242. The solar eclipse on December 22, 2242. The solar eclipse on January 21, 2243. The solar eclipse on June 18, 2243. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2243. The solar eclipse on June 6, 2244. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2244. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2245. The solar eclipse on November 20, 2245. The solar eclipse on April 16, 2246. The solar eclipse on May 16, 2246. The solar eclipse on October 10, 2246. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2246. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2247. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2247. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2248. The solar eclipse on September 18, 2248. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2249. The solar eclipse on September 7, 2249. The solar eclipse on February 2, 2250. The solar eclipse on July 30, 2250. The solar eclipse on August 28, 2250. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2251. The solar eclipse on July 19, 2251. The solar eclipse on January 12, 2252. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2252. The solar eclipse on December 31, 2252. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2253. The solar eclipse on November 21, 2253. The solar eclipse on December 21, 2253. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2254. The solar eclipse on November 11, 2254. The solar eclipse on May 7, 2255. The solar eclipse on October 31, 2255. The solar eclipse on April 25, 2256. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2256. The solar eclipse on March 16, 2257. The solar eclipse on April 15, 2257. The solar eclipse on September 9, 2257. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2257. The solar eclipse on March 6, 2258. The solar eclipse on August 29, 2258. The solar eclipse on February 23, 2259. The solar eclipse on August 19, 2259. The solar eclipse on February 12, 2260. The solar eclipse on August 7, 2260. The solar eclipse on January 2, 2261. The solar eclipse on January 31, 2261. The solar eclipse on June 28, 2261. The solar eclipse on December 22, 2261. The solar eclipse on June 17, 2262. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2262. The solar eclipse on June 6, 2263. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2263. The solar eclipse on April 27, 2264. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2264. The solar eclipse on October 20, 2264. The solar eclipse on November 19, 2264. The solar eclipse on April 16, 2265. The solar eclipse on October 10, 2265. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2266. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2266. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2267. The solar eclipse on September 19, 2267. The solar eclipse on February 13, 2268. The solar eclipse on August 9, 2268. The solar eclipse on September 7, 2268. The solar eclipse on February 2, 2269. The solar eclipse on July 29, 2269. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2270. The solar eclipse on July 18, 2270. The solar eclipse on January 12, 2271. The solar eclipse on July 8, 2271. The solar eclipse on December 3, 2271. The solar eclipse on January 1, 2272. The solar eclipse on May 27, 2272. The solar eclipse on November 21, 2272. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2273. The solar eclipse on November 10, 2273. The solar eclipse on May 7, 2274. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2274. The solar eclipse on March 28, 2275. The solar eclipse on April 26, 2275. The solar eclipse on September 20, 2275. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2275. The solar eclipse on March 16, 2276. The solar eclipse on September 9, 2276. The solar eclipse on March 5, 2277. The solar eclipse on August 29, 2277. The solar eclipse on February 22, 2278. The solar eclipse on August 19, 2278. The solar eclipse on January 13, 2279. The solar eclipse on February 12, 2279. The solar eclipse on July 9, 2279. The solar eclipse on January 3, 2280. The solar eclipse on June 27, 2280. The solar eclipse on December 22, 2280. The solar eclipse on June 17, 2281. The solar eclipse on December 11, 2281. The solar eclipse on May 8, 2282. The solar eclipse on June 6, 2282. The solar eclipse on November 1, 2282. The solar eclipse on November 30, 2282. The solar eclipse on April 28, 2283. The solar eclipse on October 21, 2283. The solar eclipse on April 16, 2284. The solar eclipse on October 9, 2284. The solar eclipse on April 5, 2285. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2285. The solar eclipse on February 24, 2286. The solar eclipse on March 25, 2286. The solar eclipse on August 20, 2286. The solar eclipse on September 19, 2286. The solar eclipse on February 13, 2287. The solar eclipse on August 10, 2287. The solar eclipse on February 2, 2288. The solar eclipse on July 29, 2288. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2289. The solar eclipse on July 18, 2289. The solar eclipse on December 13, 2289. The solar eclipse on January 12, 2290. The solar eclipse on June 8, 2290. The solar eclipse on December 2, 2290. The solar eclipse on May 28, 2291. The solar eclipse on November 21, 2291. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2292. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2292. The solar eclipse on April 7, 2293. The solar eclipse on May 7, 2293. The solar eclipse on September 30, 2293. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2293. The solar eclipse on March 27, 2294. The solar eclipse on September 20, 2294. The solar eclipse on March 16, 2295. The solar eclipse on September 10, 2295. The solar eclipse on March 4, 2296. The solar eclipse on August 29, 2296. The solar eclipse on January 23, 2297. The solar eclipse on February 22, 2297. The solar eclipse on July 20, 2297. The solar eclipse on January 13, 2298. The solar eclipse on July 9, 2298. The solar eclipse on January 3, 2299. The solar eclipse on June 28, 2299. The solar eclipse on December 23, 2299. The solar eclipse on May 19, 2300. The solar eclipse on June 18, 2300. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2300. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2301. The solar eclipse on November 1, 2301. The solar eclipse on April 29, 2302. The solar eclipse on October 22, 2302. The solar eclipse on April 18, 2303. The solar eclipse on October 11, 2303. The solar eclipse on March 7, 2304. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2304. The solar eclipse on September 1, 2304. The solar eclipse on September 30, 2304. The solar eclipse on February 24, 2305. The solar eclipse on August 21, 2305. The solar eclipse on February 14, 2306. The solar eclipse on August 10, 2306. The solar eclipse on February 4, 2307. The solar eclipse on July 30, 2307. The solar eclipse on December 25, 2307. The solar eclipse on January 24, 2308. The solar eclipse on June 19, 2308. The solar eclipse on December 14, 2308. The solar eclipse on June 9, 2309. The solar eclipse on December 3, 2309. The solar eclipse on May 29, 2310. The solar eclipse on November 22, 2310. The solar eclipse on April 19, 2311. The solar eclipse on May 19, 2311. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2311. The solar eclipse on November 11, 2311. The solar eclipse on April 7, 2312. The solar eclipse on October 1, 2312. The solar eclipse on March 27, 2313. The solar eclipse on September 21, 2313. The solar eclipse on March 17, 2314. The solar eclipse on September 10, 2314. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2315. The solar eclipse on March 6, 2315. The solar eclipse on August 1, 2315. The solar eclipse on January 25, 2316. The solar eclipse on July 20, 2316. The solar eclipse on January 14, 2317. The solar eclipse on July 9, 2317. The solar eclipse on January 3, 2318. The solar eclipse on May 31, 2318. The solar eclipse on June 29, 2318. The solar eclipse on December 23, 2318. The solar eclipse on May 20, 2319. The solar eclipse on November 13, 2319. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2320. The solar eclipse on November 1, 2320. The solar eclipse on April 28, 2321. The solar eclipse on October 22, 2321. The solar eclipse on March 18, 2322. The solar eclipse on April 17, 2322. The solar eclipse on September 12, 2322. The solar eclipse on October 11, 2322. The solar eclipse on March 8, 2323. The solar eclipse on September 1, 2323. The solar eclipse on February 25, 2324. The solar eclipse on August 20, 2324. The solar eclipse on February 14, 2325. The solar eclipse on August 9, 2325. The solar eclipse on January 5, 2326. The solar eclipse on February 3, 2326. The solar eclipse on June 30, 2326. The solar eclipse on December 25, 2326. The solar eclipse on June 20, 2327. The solar eclipse on December 14, 2327. The solar eclipse on June 9, 2328. The solar eclipse on December 2, 2328. The solar eclipse on April 30, 2329. The solar eclipse on May 29, 2329. The solar eclipse on October 23, 2329. The solar eclipse on November 21, 2329. The solar eclipse on April 19, 2330. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2330. The solar eclipse on April 8, 2331. The solar eclipse on October 2, 2331. The solar eclipse on March 27, 2332. The solar eclipse on September 21, 2332. The solar eclipse on February 15, 2333. The solar eclipse on March 17, 2333. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2333. The solar eclipse on September 10, 2333. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2334. The solar eclipse on July 31, 2334. The solar eclipse on January 25, 2335. The solar eclipse on July 21, 2335. The solar eclipse on January 14, 2336. The solar eclipse on July 9, 2336. The solar eclipse on January 2, 2337. The solar eclipse on May 31, 2337. The solar eclipse on November 23, 2337. The solar eclipse on May 20, 2338. The solar eclipse on November 12, 2338. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2339. The solar eclipse on November 2, 2339. The solar eclipse on March 29, 2340. The solar eclipse on April 27, 2340. The solar eclipse on September 22, 2340. The solar eclipse on October 22, 2340. The solar eclipse on March 18, 2341. The solar eclipse on September 12, 2341. The solar eclipse on March 8, 2342. The solar eclipse on September 1, 2342. The solar eclipse on February 25, 2343. The solar eclipse on August 21, 2343. The solar eclipse on January 16, 2344. The solar eclipse on February 15, 2344. The solar eclipse on July 11, 2344. The solar eclipse on August 9, 2344. The solar eclipse on January 4, 2345. The solar eclipse on June 30, 2345. The solar eclipse on December 24, 2345. The solar eclipse on June 20, 2346. The solar eclipse on December 13, 2346. The solar eclipse on May 11, 2347. The solar eclipse on June 10, 2347. The solar eclipse on November 3, 2347. The solar eclipse on December 3, 2347. The solar eclipse on April 29, 2348. The solar eclipse on October 23, 2348. The solar eclipse on April 18, 2349. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2349. The solar eclipse on April 7, 2350. The solar eclipse on October 2, 2350. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2351. The solar eclipse on March 28, 2351. The solar eclipse on August 22, 2351. The solar eclipse on September 21, 2351. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2352. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2352. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2353. The solar eclipse on July 31, 2353. The solar eclipse on January 25, 2354. The solar eclipse on July 21, 2354. The solar eclipse on January 14, 2355. The solar eclipse on June 11, 2355. The solar eclipse on December 4, 2355. The solar eclipse on May 30, 2356. The solar eclipse on November 23, 2356. The solar eclipse on May 20, 2357. The solar eclipse on November 12, 2357. The solar eclipse on April 9, 2358. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2358. The solar eclipse on October 4, 2358. The solar eclipse on November 2, 2358. The solar eclipse on March 29, 2359. The solar eclipse on September 23, 2359. The solar eclipse on March 18, 2360. The solar eclipse on September 11, 2360. The solar eclipse on March 8, 2361. The solar eclipse on August 31, 2361. The solar eclipse on January 27, 2362. The solar eclipse on February 25, 2362. The solar eclipse on July 22, 2362. The solar eclipse on August 20, 2362. The solar eclipse on January 16, 2363. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2363. The solar eclipse on January 5, 2364. The solar eclipse on June 30, 2364. The solar eclipse on December 24, 2364. The solar eclipse on June 20, 2365. The solar eclipse on November 14, 2365. The solar eclipse on December 13, 2365. The solar eclipse on May 10, 2366. The solar eclipse on November 3, 2366. The solar eclipse on April 29, 2367. The solar eclipse on October 24, 2367. The solar eclipse on April 18, 2368. The solar eclipse on October 12, 2368. The solar eclipse on March 9, 2369. The solar eclipse on April 7, 2369. The solar eclipse on September 2, 2369. The solar eclipse on October 1, 2369. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2370. The solar eclipse on August 22, 2370. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2371. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2371. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2372. The solar eclipse on July 31, 2372. The solar eclipse on January 24, 2373. The solar eclipse on June 21, 2373. The solar eclipse on December 15, 2373. The solar eclipse on June 11, 2374. The solar eclipse on December 4, 2374. The solar eclipse on May 31, 2375. The solar eclipse on November 24, 2375. The solar eclipse on May 19, 2376. The solar eclipse on October 14, 2376. The solar eclipse on November 12, 2376. The solar eclipse on April 9, 2377. The solar eclipse on October 3, 2377. The solar eclipse on March 29, 2378. The solar eclipse on September 22, 2378. The solar eclipse on March 19, 2379. The solar eclipse on September 11, 2379. The solar eclipse on February 7, 2380. The solar eclipse on March 7, 2380. The solar eclipse on August 1, 2380. The solar eclipse on August 31, 2380. The solar eclipse on January 26, 2381. The solar eclipse on July 22, 2381. The solar eclipse on January 15, 2382. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2382. The solar eclipse on January 4, 2383. The solar eclipse on July 1, 2383. The solar eclipse on November 25, 2383. The solar eclipse on December 25, 2383. The solar eclipse on May 21, 2384. The solar eclipse on November 14, 2384. The solar eclipse on May 10, 2385. The solar eclipse on November 3, 2385. The solar eclipse on April 29, 2386. The solar eclipse on October 24, 2386. The solar eclipse on March 20, 2387. The solar eclipse on April 19, 2387. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2387. The solar eclipse on March 9, 2388. The solar eclipse on September 1, 2388. The solar eclipse on February 26, 2389. The solar eclipse on August 22, 2389. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2390. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2390. The solar eclipse on February 4, 2391. The solar eclipse on July 3, 2391. The solar eclipse on August 1, 2391. The solar eclipse on December 26, 2391. The solar eclipse on June 21, 2392. The solar eclipse on December 14, 2392. The solar eclipse on June 10, 2393. The solar eclipse on December 4, 2393. The solar eclipse on May 30, 2394. The solar eclipse on October 25, 2394. The solar eclipse on November 24, 2394. The solar eclipse on April 20, 2395. The solar eclipse on October 14, 2395. The solar eclipse on April 9, 2396. The solar eclipse on October 2, 2396. The solar eclipse on March 29, 2397. The solar eclipse on September 22, 2397. The solar eclipse on February 17, 2398. The solar eclipse on March 19, 2398. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2398. The solar eclipse on September 11, 2398. The solar eclipse on February 6, 2399. The solar eclipse on August 2, 2399. The solar eclipse on January 26, 2400. The solar eclipse on July 22, 2400. The solar eclipse on January 14, 2401. The solar eclipse on July 11, 2401. The solar eclipse on December 5, 2401. The solar eclipse on January 4, 2402. The solar eclipse on June 1, 2402. The solar eclipse on November 25, 2402. The solar eclipse on May 21, 2403. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2403. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2404. The solar eclipse on November 3, 2404. The solar eclipse on March 31, 2405. The solar eclipse on April 29, 2405. The solar eclipse on October 23, 2405. The solar eclipse on March 20, 2406. The solar eclipse on September 12, 2406. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2407. The solar eclipse on September 2, 2407. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2408. The solar eclipse on August 22, 2408. The solar eclipse on February 15, 2409. The solar eclipse on July 13, 2409. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2409. The solar eclipse on January 5, 2410. The solar eclipse on July 2, 2410. The solar eclipse on December 26, 2410. The solar eclipse on June 21, 2411. The solar eclipse on December 16, 2411. The solar eclipse on June 9, 2412. The solar eclipse on December 4, 2412. The solar eclipse on April 30, 2413. The solar eclipse on October 25, 2413. The solar eclipse on April 20, 2414. The solar eclipse on October 14, 2414. The solar eclipse on April 10, 2415. The solar eclipse on October 3, 2415. The solar eclipse on February 29, 2416. The solar eclipse on March 29, 2416. The solar eclipse on August 23, 2416. The solar eclipse on September 21, 2416. The solar eclipse on February 17, 2417. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2417. The solar eclipse on February 6, 2418, the solar eclipse on August 2, 2418, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2419, the solar eclipse on July 23, 2419, the solar eclipse on December 17, 2419, the solar eclipse on January 15, 2420, the solar eclipse on June 11, 2420, the solar eclipse on December 5, 2420, the solar eclipse on May 31, 2421, the solar eclipse on November 25, 2421, the solar eclipse on May 21, 2422, the solar eclipse on November 14, 2422, the solar eclipse on April 11, 2423, the solar eclipse on May 10, 2423, the solar eclipse on November 3, 2423, the solar eclipse on March 31, 2424, the solar eclipse on September 23, 2424, the solar eclipse on March 20, 2425, the solar eclipse on September 12, 2425, the solar eclipse on March 9, 2426, the solar eclipse on September 2, 2426, the solar eclipse on February 26, 2427, the solar eclipse on July 24, 2427, the solar eclipse on August 23, 2427, the solar eclipse on January 17, 2428, the solar eclipse on July 13, 2428, the solar eclipse on January 5, 2429, the solar eclipse on July 2, 2429, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2429, the solar eclipse on June 21, 2430, the solar eclipse on December 15, 2430, the solar eclipse on May 12, 2431, the solar eclipse on November 5, 2431, the solar eclipse on April 30, 2432, the solar eclipse on October 24, 2432, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2433, the solar eclipse on October 13, 2433, the solar eclipse on March 11, 2434, the solar eclipse on April 9, 2434, the solar eclipse on September 3, 2434, the solar eclipse on October 3, 2434, the solar eclipse on February 28, 2435, the solar eclipse on August 24, 2435, the solar eclipse on February 17, 2436, the solar eclipse on August 13, 2436, the solar eclipse on February 5, 2437, the solar eclipse on August 2, 2437, the solar eclipse on December 27, 2437, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2438, the solar eclipse on June 22, 2438, the solar eclipse on December 17, 2438, the solar eclipse on June 12, 2439, the solar eclipse on December 6, 2439, the solar eclipse on May 31, 2440, the solar eclipse on November 25, 2440, the solar eclipse on April 21, 2441, the solar eclipse on May 21, 2441, the solar eclipse on November 14, 2441, the solar eclipse on April 11, 2442, the solar eclipse on October 4, 2442, the solar eclipse on March 31, 2443, the solar eclipse on September 24, 2443, the solar eclipse on March 19, 2444, the solar eclipse on September 12, 2444, the solar eclipse on March 8, 2445, the solar eclipse on August 4, 2445, the solar eclipse on September 2, 2445, the solar eclipse on January 27, 2446, the solar eclipse on July 24, 2446, the solar eclipse on January 17, 2447, the solar eclipse on July 13, 2447, the solar eclipse on January 6, 2448, the solar eclipse on July 1, 2448, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2448, the solar eclipse on May 22, 2449, the solar eclipse on November 15, 2449, the solar eclipse on May 12, 2450, the solar eclipse on November 4, 2450, the solar eclipse on May 1, 2451, the solar eclipse on October 24, 2451, the solar eclipse on March 21, 2452, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2452, The solar eclipse on September 14, 2452. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2452. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2453. The solar eclipse on September 3, 2453. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2454. The solar eclipse on August 24, 2454. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2455. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2455. The solar eclipse on January 8, 2456. The solar eclipse on February 6, 2456. The solar eclipse on July 3, 2456. The solar eclipse on December 27, 2456. The solar eclipse on June 22, 2457. The solar eclipse on December 17, 2457. The solar eclipse on June 11, 2458. The solar eclipse on December 6, 2458. The solar eclipse on May 3, 2459. The solar eclipse on June 1, 2459. The solar eclipse on November 25, 2459. The solar eclipse on April 21, 2460. The solar eclipse on October 14, 2460. The solar eclipse on April 11, 2461. The solar eclipse on October 4, 2461. The solar eclipse on March 31, 2462. The solar eclipse on September 24, 2462. The solar eclipse on March 20, 2463. The solar eclipse on August 15, 2463. The solar eclipse on September 13, 2463. The solar eclipse on February 7, 2464. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2464. The solar eclipse on January 27, 2465. The solar eclipse on July 23, 2465. The solar eclipse on January 17, 2466. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2466. The solar eclipse on January 6, 2467. The solar eclipse on June 2, 2467. The solar eclipse on November 27, 2467. The solar eclipse on May 22, 2468. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2468. The solar eclipse on May 12, 2469. The solar eclipse on November 4, 2469. The solar eclipse on May 1, 2470. The solar eclipse on September 25, 2470. The solar eclipse on October 24, 2470. The solar eclipse on March 22, 2471. The solar eclipse on September 15, 2471. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2472. The solar eclipse on September 3, 2472. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2473. The solar eclipse on August 24, 2473. The solar eclipse on January 18, 2474. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2474. The solar eclipse on July 14, 2474. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2474. The solar eclipse on January 8, 2475. The solar eclipse on July 3, 2475. The solar eclipse on December 28, 2475. The solar eclipse on June 22, 2476. The solar eclipse on December 16, 2476. The solar eclipse on June 11, 2477. The solar eclipse on December 5, 2477. The solar eclipse on May 3, 2478. The solar eclipse on October 26, 2478. The solar eclipse on April 22, 2479. The solar eclipse on October 15, 2479. The solar eclipse on April 10, 2480. The solar eclipse on October 4, 2480. The solar eclipse on March 30, 2481. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2481. The solar eclipse on September 24, 2481. The solar eclipse on February 18, 2482. The solar eclipse on August 14, 2482. The solar eclipse on February 7, 2483. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2483. The solar eclipse on January 28, 2484. The solar eclipse on July 23, 2484. The solar eclipse on January 17, 2485. The solar eclipse on June 13, 2485. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2485. The solar eclipse on December 7, 2485. The solar eclipse on June 2, 2486. the solar eclipse on November 26, 2486, the solar eclipse on May 23, 2487, the solar eclipse on November 15, 2487, the solar eclipse on May 11, 2488, the solar eclipse on November 4, 2488, the solar eclipse on April 1, 2489, the solar eclipse on September 25, 2489, the solar eclipse on March 21, 2490, the solar eclipse on September 14, 2490, the solar eclipse on March 10, 2491, the solar eclipse on September 4, 2491, the solar eclipse on January 29, 2492, the solar eclipse on February 28, 2492, the solar eclipse on July 24, 2492, the solar eclipse on August 23, 2492, the solar eclipse on January 18, 2493, the solar eclipse on July 13, 2493, the solar eclipse on January 7, 2494, the solar eclipse on July 3, 2494, the solar eclipse on December 28, 2494, the solar eclipse on June 23, 2495, the solar eclipse on December 17, 2495, the solar eclipse on May 13, 2496, the solar eclipse on November 5, 2496, the solar eclipse on May 2, 2497, the solar eclipse on October 26, 2497, the solar eclipse on April 21, 2498, the solar eclipse on October 15, 2498, the solar eclipse on April 10, 2499, the solar eclipse on September 5, 2499, the solar eclipse on October 5, 2499, the solar eclipse on March 1, 2500, the solar eclipse on August 26, 2500, the solar eclipse on February 19, 2501, the solar eclipse on August 15, 2501, the solar eclipse on February 8, 2502, the solar eclipse on August 4, 2502, the solar eclipse on January 29, 2503, the solar eclipse on June 25, 2503, the solar eclipse on July 24, 2503, the solar eclipse on December 19, 2503, the solar eclipse on June 14, 2504, the solar eclipse on December 7, 2504, the solar eclipse on June 3, 2505, the solar eclipse on November 26, 2505, the solar eclipse on May 24, 2506, the solar eclipse on November 16, 2506, the solar eclipse on April 13, 2507, the solar eclipse on October 7, 2507, the solar eclipse on April 1, 2508, the solar eclipse on September 26, 2508, the solar eclipse on March 22, 2509, the solar eclipse on September 15, 2509, the solar eclipse on February 10, 2510, the solar eclipse on March 11, 2510, the solar eclipse on August 6, 2510, the solar eclipse on September 4, 2510, the solar eclipse on January 30, 2511, the solar eclipse on July 26, 2511, the solar eclipse on January 20, 2512, the solar eclipse on July 14, 2512, the solar eclipse on January 8, 2513, the solar eclipse on July 4, 2513, the solar eclipse on December 28, 2513, the solar eclipse on May 25, 2514, the solar eclipse on November 17, 2514, the solar eclipse on May 15, 2515, the solar eclipse on November 7, 2515, the solar eclipse on May 3, 2516, the solar eclipse on October 27, 2516, the solar eclipse on April 22, 2517, the solar eclipse on October 16, 2517, the solar eclipse on March 12, 2518, the solar eclipse on September 6, 2518, the solar eclipse on March 2, 2519, the solar eclipse on August 26, 2519, the solar eclipse on February 20, 2520, the solar eclipse on August 14, 2520, the solar eclipse on February 8, 2521, the solar eclipse on July 5, 2521, the solar eclipse on August 4, 2521, the solar eclipse on December 30, 2521, the solar eclipse on June 25, 2522, the solar eclipse on December 19, 2522, The solar eclipse on June 15, 2523. The solar eclipse on December 8, 2523. The solar eclipse on June 3, 2524. The solar eclipse on November 26, 2524. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2525. The solar eclipse on October 18, 2525. The solar eclipse on April 13, 2526. The solar eclipse on October 7, 2526. The solar eclipse on April 2, 2527. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2527. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2528. The solar eclipse on March 21, 2528. The solar eclipse on September 14, 2528. The solar eclipse on February 10, 2529. The solar eclipse on August 5, 2529. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2530. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2530. The solar eclipse on January 19, 2531. The solar eclipse on July 15, 2531. The solar eclipse on January 8, 2532. The solar eclipse on June 5, 2532. The solar eclipse on July 4, 2532. The solar eclipse on November 28, 2532. The solar eclipse on May 25, 2533. The solar eclipse on November 17, 2533. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2534. The solar eclipse on November 7, 2534. The solar eclipse on May 3, 2535. The solar eclipse on October 28, 2535. The solar eclipse on March 23, 2536. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2536. The solar eclipse on March 12, 2537. The solar eclipse on September 5, 2537. The solar eclipse on March 2, 2538. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2538. The solar eclipse on February 20, 2539. The solar eclipse on July 16, 2539. The solar eclipse on August 15, 2539. The solar eclipse on January 10, 2540. The solar eclipse on July 5, 2540. The solar eclipse on December 29, 2540. The solar eclipse on June 25, 2541. The solar eclipse on December 18, 2541. The solar eclipse on June 14, 2542. The solar eclipse on December 8, 2542. The solar eclipse on May 5, 2543. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2543. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2544. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2544. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2545. The solar eclipse on October 7, 2545. The solar eclipse on April 2, 2546. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2546. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2547. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2547. The solar eclipse on February 10, 2548. The solar eclipse on August 5, 2548. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2549. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2549. The solar eclipse on January 19, 2550. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2550. The solar eclipse on July 15, 2550. The solar eclipse on December 9, 2550. The solar eclipse on June 5, 2551. The solar eclipse on November 29, 2551. The solar eclipse on May 24, 2552. The solar eclipse on November 17, 2552. The solar eclipse on May 13, 2553. The solar eclipse on November 7, 2553. The solar eclipse on April 3, 2554. The solar eclipse on September 28, 2554. The solar eclipse on March 24, 2555. The solar eclipse on September 17, 2555. The solar eclipse on March 12, 2556. The solar eclipse on September 5, 2556. The solar eclipse on March 2, 2557. The solar eclipse on July 27, 2557. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2557. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2558. The solar eclipse on July 17, 2558. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2559. The solar eclipse on July 6, 2559. The solar eclipse on December 30, 2559. The solar eclipse on June 25, 2560. The solar eclipse on December 18, 2560. The solar eclipse on May 15, 2561. The solar eclipse on November 8, 2561. The solar eclipse on May 4, 2562. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2562. The solar eclipse on April 24, 2563. The solar eclipse on October 18, 2563. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2564. The solar eclipse on October 6, 2564. The solar eclipse on March 3, 2565. The solar eclipse on August 27, 2565. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2566. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2566. The solar eclipse on February 10, 2567. The solar eclipse on August 6, 2567. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2568. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2568. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2568. The solar eclipse on December 19, 2568. The solar eclipse on June 15, 2569. The solar eclipse on December 9, 2569. The solar eclipse on June 5, 2570. The solar eclipse on November 29, 2570. The solar eclipse on May 25, 2571. The solar eclipse on November 18, 2571. The solar eclipse on April 13, 2572. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2572. The solar eclipse on April 3, 2573. The solar eclipse on September 27, 2573. The solar eclipse on March 24, 2574. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2574. The solar eclipse on March 13, 2575. The solar eclipse on August 7, 2575. The solar eclipse on September 5, 2575. The solar eclipse on February 1, 2576. The solar eclipse on July 27, 2576. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2577. The solar eclipse on July 16, 2577. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2578. The solar eclipse on July 6, 2578. The solar eclipse on December 29, 2578. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2579. The solar eclipse on November 20, 2579. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2580. The solar eclipse on November 8, 2580. The solar eclipse on May 4, 2581. The solar eclipse on October 28, 2581. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2582. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2582. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2583. The solar eclipse on September 7, 2583. The solar eclipse on March 3, 2584. The solar eclipse on August 26, 2584. The solar eclipse on February 20, 2585. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2585. The solar eclipse on February 9, 2586. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2586. The solar eclipse on August 6, 2586. The solar eclipse on December 31, 2586. The solar eclipse on June 27, 2587. The solar eclipse on December 20, 2587. The solar eclipse on June 15, 2588. The solar eclipse on December 9, 2588. The solar eclipse on June 4, 2589. The solar eclipse on November 29, 2589. The solar eclipse on April 25, 2590. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2590. The solar eclipse on April 14, 2591. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2591. The solar eclipse on April 3, 2592. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2592. The solar eclipse on March 24, 2593. The solar eclipse on August 17, 2593. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2593. The solar eclipse on February 11, 2594. The solar eclipse on August 7, 2594. The solar eclipse on January 31, 2595. The solar eclipse on July 28, 2595. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2596. The solar eclipse on July 16, 2596. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2597. The solar eclipse on June 6, 2597. The solar eclipse on July 5, 2597. The solar eclipse on November 30, 2597. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2598. The solar eclipse on November 19, 2598. The solar eclipse on May 15, 2599. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2599. The solar eclipse on May 5, 2600. The solar eclipse on October 29, 2600. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2601. The solar eclipse on September 18, 2601. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2602. The solar eclipse on September 8, 2602. The solar eclipse on March 5, 2603. The solar eclipse on August 28, 2603. The solar eclipse on February 22, 2604. The solar eclipse on July 19, 2604. The solar eclipse on August 17, 2604. The solar eclipse on January 11, 2605. The solar eclipse on July 8, 2605. The solar eclipse on January 1, 2606. The solar eclipse on June 27, 2606. The solar eclipse on December 21, 2606. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2607. The solar eclipse on December 11, 2607. The solar eclipse on May 6, 2608. The solar eclipse on June 4, 2608. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2608. The solar eclipse on April 26, 2609. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2609. The solar eclipse on April 15, 2610. The solar eclipse on October 9, 2610. The solar eclipse on April 5, 2611. The solar eclipse on September 28, 2611. The solar eclipse on February 23, 2612. The solar eclipse on August 18, 2612. The solar eclipse on February 11, 2613. The solar eclipse on August 8, 2613. The solar eclipse on February 1, 2614. The solar eclipse on July 28, 2614. The solar eclipse on January 21, 2615. The solar eclipse on June 18, 2615. The solar eclipse on July 18, 2615. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2615. The solar eclipse on June 6, 2616. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2616. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2617. The solar eclipse on November 20, 2617. The solar eclipse on May 16, 2618. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2618. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2619. The solar eclipse on September 30, 2619. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2620. The solar eclipse on September 18, 2620. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2621. The solar eclipse on September 8, 2621. The solar eclipse on March 4, 2622. The solar eclipse on July 30, 2622. The solar eclipse on August 28, 2622. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2623. The solar eclipse on July 19, 2623. The solar eclipse on January 12, 2624. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2624. The solar eclipse on January 1, 2625. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2625. The solar eclipse on December 21, 2625. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2626. The solar eclipse on June 16, 2626. The solar eclipse on November 11, 2626. The solar eclipse on May 7, 2627. The solar eclipse on October 31, 2627. The solar eclipse on April 26, 2628. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2628. The solar eclipse on April 15, 2629. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2629. The solar eclipse on March 6, 2630. The solar eclipse on August 30, 2630. The solar eclipse on February 23, 2631. The solar eclipse on August 19, 2631. The solar eclipse on February 12, 2632. The solar eclipse on August 8, 2632. The solar eclipse on January 31, 2633. The solar eclipse on June 28, 2633. The solar eclipse on July 28, 2633. The solar eclipse on December 23, 2633. The solar eclipse on June 17, 2634. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2634. The solar eclipse on June 7, 2635. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2635. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2636. The solar eclipse on November 19, 2636. The solar eclipse on April 17, 2637. The solar eclipse on October 10, 2637. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2638. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2638. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2639. The solar eclipse on September 19, 2639. The solar eclipse on March 14, 2640. The solar eclipse on September 8, 2640. The solar eclipse on February 2, 2641. The solar eclipse on July 30, 2641. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2642. The solar eclipse on July 19, 2642. The solar eclipse on January 12, 2643. The solar eclipse on July 8, 2643. The solar eclipse on January 2, 2644. The solar eclipse on May 28, 2644. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2644. The solar eclipse on November 21, 2644. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2645. The solar eclipse on November 10, 2645. The solar eclipse on May 7, 2646. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2646. The solar eclipse on April 27, 2647. The solar eclipse on October 20, 2647. The solar eclipse on March 16, 2648. The solar eclipse on September 9, 2648. The solar eclipse on March 5, 2649. The solar eclipse on August 30, 2649. The solar eclipse on February 22, 2650. The solar eclipse on August 19, 2650. The solar eclipse on February 12, 2651. The solar eclipse on August 8, 2651. The solar eclipse on January 3, 2652. The solar eclipse on June 28, 2652. The solar eclipse on December 22, 2652. The solar eclipse on June 17, 2653. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2653. The solar eclipse on June 7, 2654. The solar eclipse on December 1, 2654. The solar eclipse on April 28, 2655. The solar eclipse on May 27, 2655. The solar eclipse on October 21, 2655. The solar eclipse on April 16, 2656. The solar eclipse on October 10, 2656. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2657. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2657. The solar eclipse on March 26, 2658. The solar eclipse on September 19, 2658. The solar eclipse on February 13, 2659. The solar eclipse on August 10, 2659. The solar eclipse on February 3, 2660. The solar eclipse on July 29, 2660. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2661. The solar eclipse on July 18, 2661. The solar eclipse on January 12, 2662. The solar eclipse on June 8, 2662. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2662. The solar eclipse on December 2, 2662. The solar eclipse on May 29, 2663. The solar eclipse on November 21, 2663. The solar eclipse on May 17, 2664. The solar eclipse on November 10, 2664. The solar eclipse on May 7, 2665. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2665. The solar eclipse on March 27, 2666. The solar eclipse on September 20, 2666. The solar eclipse on October 20, 2666. The solar eclipse on March 16, 2667. The solar eclipse on September 10, 2667. The solar eclipse on March 5, 2668. The solar eclipse on August 29, 2668. The solar eclipse on February 22, 2669. the solar eclipse on August 18, 2669, the solar eclipse on January 13, 2670, the solar eclipse on July 9, 2670, the solar eclipse on January 3, 2671, the solar eclipse on June 28, 2671, the solar eclipse on December 23, 2671, the solar eclipse on June 17, 2672, the solar eclipse on December 11, 2672, the solar eclipse on May 8, 2673, the solar eclipse on June 7, 2673, the solar eclipse on October 31, 2673, the solar eclipse on April 28, 2674, the solar eclipse on October 21, 2674, the solar eclipse on April 17, 2675, the solar eclipse on October 11, 2675, the solar eclipse on April 5, 2676, the solar eclipse on September 29, 2676, the solar eclipse on February 24, 2677, the solar eclipse on August 20, 2677, the solar eclipse on February 13, 2678, the solar eclipse on August 9, 2678, the solar eclipse on February 3, 2679, the solar eclipse on July 29, 2679, the solar eclipse on January 23, 2680, the solar eclipse on June 18, 2680, the solar eclipse on July 18, 2680, the solar eclipse on December 13, 2680, the solar eclipse on June 8, 2681, the solar eclipse on December 2, 2681, the solar eclipse on May 29, 2682, the solar eclipse on November 21, 2682, the solar eclipse on May 18, 2683, the solar eclipse on November 10, 2683, the solar eclipse on April 7, 2684, the solar eclipse on October 1, 2684, the solar eclipse on October 30, 2684, the solar eclipse on March 27, 2685, the solar eclipse on September 20, 2685, the solar eclipse on March 16, 2686, the solar eclipse on September 10, 2686, the solar eclipse on March 6, 2687, the solar eclipse on August 30, 2687, the solar eclipse on January 25, 2688, the solar eclipse on July 19, 2688, the solar eclipse on January 13, 2689, the solar eclipse on July 9, 2689, the solar eclipse on January 2, 2690, the solar eclipse on June 28, 2690, the solar eclipse on December 22, 2690, the solar eclipse on May 20, 2691, the solar eclipse on June 18, 2691, the solar eclipse on November 12, 2691, the solar eclipse on December 11, 2691, the solar eclipse on May 8, 2692, the solar eclipse on October 31, 2692, the solar eclipse on April 27, 2693, the solar eclipse on October 21, 2693, the solar eclipse on April 16, 2694, the solar eclipse on October 11, 2694, the solar eclipse on March 7, 2695, the solar eclipse on August 31, 2695, the solar eclipse on February 25, 2696, the solar eclipse on August 19, 2696, the solar eclipse on February 13, 2697, the solar eclipse on August 9, 2697, the solar eclipse on February 3, 2698, the solar eclipse on June 30, 2698, the solar eclipse on July 29, 2698, the solar eclipse on December 24, 2698, the solar eclipse on June 19, 2699, the solar eclipse on December 13, 2699, the solar eclipse on July 9, 2700, the solar eclipse on December 2, 2700, the solar eclipse on May 29, 2701, the solar eclipse on November 22, 2701, the solar eclipse on April 19, 2702, the solar eclipse on October 13, 2702, the solar eclipse on November 11, 2702, the solar eclipse on April 8, 2703, the solar eclipse on October 3, 2703, the solar eclipse on March 27, 2704, the solar eclipse on September 21, 2704, The solar eclipse on March 17, 2705. The solar eclipse on September 10, 2705. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2706. The solar eclipse on July 31, 2706. The solar eclipse on January 26, 2707. The solar eclipse on July 21, 2707. The solar eclipse on January 15, 2708. The solar eclipse on July 10, 2708. The solar eclipse on January 3, 2709. The solar eclipse on May 31, 2709. The solar eclipse on June 29, 2709. The solar eclipse on November 23, 2709. The solar eclipse on December 23, 2709. The solar eclipse on May 20, 2710. The solar eclipse on November 13, 2710. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2711. The solar eclipse on November 2, 2711. The solar eclipse on April 27, 2712. The solar eclipse on October 22, 2712. The solar eclipse on March 18, 2713. The solar eclipse on September 12, 2713. The solar eclipse on March 8, 2714. The solar eclipse on September 1, 2714. The solar eclipse on February 26, 2715. The solar eclipse on August 21, 2715. The solar eclipse on February 15, 2716. The solar eclipse on July 11, 2716. The solar eclipse on August 9, 2716. The solar eclipse on January 4, 2717. The solar eclipse on July 1, 2717. The solar eclipse on December 24, 2717. The solar eclipse on June 20, 2718. The solar eclipse on December 14, 2718. The solar eclipse on June 10, 2719. The solar eclipse on December 3, 2719. The solar eclipse on April 29, 2720. The solar eclipse on October 23, 2720. The solar eclipse on November 22, 2720. The solar eclipse on April 18, 2721. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2721. The solar eclipse on April 8, 2722. The solar eclipse on October 2, 2722. The solar eclipse on March 28, 2723. The solar eclipse on September 21, 2723. The solar eclipse on February 16, 2724. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2724. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2725. The solar eclipse on July 31, 2725. The solar eclipse on January 25, 2726. The solar eclipse on July 21, 2726. The solar eclipse on January 14, 2727. The solar eclipse on June 11, 2727. The solar eclipse on July 11, 2727. The solar eclipse on December 5, 2727. The solar eclipse on January 3, 2728. The solar eclipse on May 31, 2728. The solar eclipse on November 23, 2728. The solar eclipse on May 20, 2729. The solar eclipse on November 13, 2729. The solar eclipse on May 9, 2730. The solar eclipse on November 2, 2730. The solar eclipse on March 30, 2731. The solar eclipse on April 28, 2731. The solar eclipse on September 23, 2731. The solar eclipse on March 18, 2732. The solar eclipse on September 11, 2732. The solar eclipse on March 8, 2733. The solar eclipse on August 31, 2733. The solar eclipse on February 25, 2734. The solar eclipse on August 21, 2734. The solar eclipse on January 16, 2735. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2735. The solar eclipse on January 5, 2736. The solar eclipse on July 1, 2736. The solar eclipse on December 24, 2736. The solar eclipse on June 20, 2737. The solar eclipse on December 13, 2737. The solar eclipse on May 10, 2738. The solar eclipse on June 9, 2738. The solar eclipse on November 4, 2738. The solar eclipse on December 3, 2738. the solar eclipse on April 30, 2739, the solar eclipse on October 24, 2739, the solar eclipse on April 18, 2740, the solar eclipse on October 12, 2740, the solar eclipse on April 8, 2741, the solar eclipse on October 1, 2741, the solar eclipse on February 27, 2742, the solar eclipse on August 22, 2742, the solar eclipse on February 16, 2743, the solar eclipse on August 12, 2743, the solar eclipse on February 5, 2744, the solar eclipse on July 31, 2744, the solar eclipse on January 24, 2745, the solar eclipse on June 22, 2745, the solar eclipse on July 21, 2745, the solar eclipse on December 15, 2745, the solar eclipse on January 13, 2746, the solar eclipse on June 11, 2746, the solar eclipse on December 4, 2746, the solar eclipse on May 31, 2747, the solar eclipse on November 24, 2747, the solar eclipse on May 19, 2748, the solar eclipse on November 13, 2748, the solar eclipse on April 9, 2749, the solar eclipse on May 8, 2749, the solar eclipse on October 3, 2749, the solar eclipse on March 30, 2750, the solar eclipse on September 22, 2750, the solar eclipse on March 19, 2751, the solar eclipse on September 11, 2751, the solar eclipse on March 8, 2752, the solar eclipse on August 31, 2752, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2753, the solar eclipse on July 22, 2753, the solar eclipse on January 15, 2754, the solar eclipse on July 12, 2754, the solar eclipse on January 4, 2755, the solar eclipse on July 1, 2755, the solar eclipse on December 25, 2755, the solar eclipse on May 21, 2756, the solar eclipse on June 19, 2756, the solar eclipse on November 14, 2756, the solar eclipse on December 14, 2756, the solar eclipse on May 10, 2757, the solar eclipse on November 4, 2757, the solar eclipse on April 29, 2758, the solar eclipse on October 24, 2758, the solar eclipse on April 19, 2759, the solar eclipse on October 13, 2759, the solar eclipse on March 9, 2760, the solar eclipse on April 8, 2760, the solar eclipse on September 1, 2760, the solar eclipse on October 1, 2760, the solar eclipse on February 27, 2761, the solar eclipse on August 22, 2761, the solar eclipse on February 16, 2762, the solar eclipse on August 12, 2762, the solar eclipse on February 5, 2763, the solar eclipse on July 3, 2763, the solar eclipse on August 1, 2763, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2763, the solar eclipse on January 25, 2764, the solar eclipse on June 21, 2764, the solar eclipse on December 15, 2764, the solar eclipse on June 10, 2765, the solar eclipse on December 4, 2765, the solar eclipse on May 30, 2766, the solar eclipse on November 24, 2766, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2767, the solar eclipse on May 20, 2767, the solar eclipse on October 15, 2767, the solar eclipse on April 9, 2768, the solar eclipse on October 3, 2768, the solar eclipse on March 30, 2769, the solar eclipse on September 22, 2769, the solar eclipse on March 19, 2770, the solar eclipse on September 11, 2770, the solar eclipse on February 6, 2771, the solar eclipse on August 3, 2771, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2772, the solar eclipse on July 22, 2772, the solar eclipse on January 15, 2773, the solar eclipse on July 12, 2773, the solar eclipse on January 4, 2774, the solar eclipse on June 1, 2774, the solar eclipse on July 1, 2774, the solar eclipse on November 25, 2774, the solar eclipse on December 25, 2774, the solar eclipse on May 21, 2775, the solar eclipse on November 15, 2775, the solar eclipse on May 10, 2776, the solar eclipse on November 3, 2776, the solar eclipse on April 29, 2777, the solar eclipse on October 23, 2777, the solar eclipse on March 21, 2778, the solar eclipse on April 19, 2778, the solar eclipse on September 13, 2778, the solar eclipse on October 12, 2778, the solar eclipse on March 10, 2779, the solar eclipse on September 2, 2779, the solar eclipse on February 27, 2780, the solar eclipse on August 22, 2780, the solar eclipse on February 15, 2781, the solar eclipse on August 12, 2781, the solar eclipse on January 6, 2782, the solar eclipse on February 4, 2782, the solar eclipse on July 2, 2782, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2782, the solar eclipse on June 22, 2783, the solar eclipse on December 16, 2783, the solar eclipse on June 10, 2784, the solar eclipse on December 4, 2784, the solar eclipse on May 1, 2785, the solar eclipse on May 30, 2785, the solar eclipse on October 25, 2785, the solar eclipse on November 24, 2785, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2786, the solar eclipse on October 14, 2786, the solar eclipse on April 10, 2787, the solar eclipse on October 3, 2787, the solar eclipse on March 29, 2788, the solar eclipse on September 22, 2788, the solar eclipse on February 17, 2789, the solar eclipse on August 13, 2789, the solar eclipse on September 11, 2789, the solar eclipse on February 6, 2790, the solar eclipse on August 3, 2790, the solar eclipse on January 26, 2791, the solar eclipse on July 23, 2791, the solar eclipse on January 16, 2792, the solar eclipse on July 11, 2792, the solar eclipse on December 6, 2792, the solar eclipse on January 4, 2793, the solar eclipse on May 31, 2793, the solar eclipse on November 25, 2793, the solar eclipse on May 21, 2794, the solar eclipse on November 14, 2794, the solar eclipse on May 11, 2795, the solar eclipse on November 3, 2795, the solar eclipse on March 31, 2796, the solar eclipse on April 29, 2796, the solar eclipse on September 23, 2796, the solar eclipse on October 22, 2796, the solar eclipse on March 20, 2797, the solar eclipse on September 13, 2797, the solar eclipse on March 9, 2798, the solar eclipse on September 2, 2798, the solar eclipse on February 26, 2799, the solar eclipse on August 23, 2799, the solar eclipse on January 17, 2800, the solar eclipse on February 15, 2800, the solar eclipse on July 13, 2800, the solar eclipse on January 6, 2801, the solar eclipse on July 2, 2801, the solar eclipse on December 26, 2801, the solar eclipse on June 21, 2802, the solar eclipse on December 16, 2802, the solar eclipse on May 12, 2803, the solar eclipse on June 10, 2803, the solar eclipse on November 5, 2803, The solar eclipse on December 5, 2803. The solar eclipse on May 1, 2804. The solar eclipse on October 24, 2804. The solar eclipse on April 20, 2805. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2805. The solar eclipse on April 10, 2806. The solar eclipse on October 3, 2806. The solar eclipse on February 28, 2807. The solar eclipse on August 24, 2807. The solar eclipse on September 23, 2807. The solar eclipse on February 17, 2808. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2808. The solar eclipse on February 5, 2809. The solar eclipse on August 2, 2809. The solar eclipse on January 26, 2810. The solar eclipse on July 22, 2810. The solar eclipse on December 17, 2810. The solar eclipse on January 16, 2811. The solar eclipse on June 12, 2811. The solar eclipse on December 7, 2811. The solar eclipse on May 31, 2812. The solar eclipse on November 25, 2812. The solar eclipse on May 21, 2813. The solar eclipse on November 14, 2813. The solar eclipse on April 11, 2814. The solar eclipse on May 11, 2814. The solar eclipse on October 4, 2814. The solar eclipse on November 3, 2814. The solar eclipse on April 1, 2815. The solar eclipse on September 24, 2815. The solar eclipse on March 20, 2816. The solar eclipse on September 13, 2816. The solar eclipse on March 9, 2817. The solar eclipse on September 2, 2817. The solar eclipse on January 27, 2818. The solar eclipse on February 26, 2818. The solar eclipse on July 24, 2818. The solar eclipse on January 17, 2819. The solar eclipse on July 13, 2819. The solar eclipse on January 7, 2820. The solar eclipse on July 1, 2820. The solar eclipse on December 26, 2820. The solar eclipse on May 22, 2821. The solar eclipse on June 21, 2821. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2821. The solar eclipse on December 15, 2821. The solar eclipse on May 12, 2822. The solar eclipse on November 4, 2822. The solar eclipse on May 2, 2823. The solar eclipse on October 25, 2823. The solar eclipse on April 20, 2824. The solar eclipse on October 13, 2824. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2825. The solar eclipse on September 4, 2825. The solar eclipse on October 3, 2825. The solar eclipse on February 27, 2826. The solar eclipse on August 24, 2826. The solar eclipse on February 17, 2827. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2827. The solar eclipse on February 6, 2828. The solar eclipse on August 1, 2828. The solar eclipse on December 28, 2828. The solar eclipse on January 26, 2829. The solar eclipse on June 22, 2829. The solar eclipse on December 17, 2829. The solar eclipse on June 12, 2830. The solar eclipse on December 6, 2830. The solar eclipse on June 1, 2831. The solar eclipse on November 25, 2831. The solar eclipse on April 22, 2832. The solar eclipse on May 21, 2832. The solar eclipse on October 15, 2832. The solar eclipse on November 13, 2832. The solar eclipse on April 11, 2833. The solar eclipse on October 4, 2833. The solar eclipse on March 31, 2834. The solar eclipse on September 24, 2834. The solar eclipse on March 20, 2835. The solar eclipse on September 14, 2835. The solar eclipse on February 8, 2836. The solar eclipse on March 8, 2836. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2836. The solar eclipse on January 27, 2837. the solar eclipse on July 23, 2837, the solar eclipse on January 17, 2838, the solar eclipse on July 12, 2838, the solar eclipse on January 6, 2839, the solar eclipse on June 3, 2839, the solar eclipse on July 2, 2839, the solar eclipse on November 27, 2839, the solar eclipse on December 27, 2839, the solar eclipse on May 22, 2840, the solar eclipse on November 15, 2840, the solar eclipse on May 12, 2841, the solar eclipse on November 4, 2841, the solar eclipse on May 1, 2842, the solar eclipse on October 25, 2842, the solar eclipse on March 22, 2843, the solar eclipse on April 20, 2843, the solar eclipse on September 15, 2843, the solar eclipse on October 14, 2843, the solar eclipse on March 10, 2844, the solar eclipse on September 3, 2844, the solar eclipse on February 27, 2845, the solar eclipse on August 24, 2845, the solar eclipse on February 17, 2846, the solar eclipse on August 13, 2846, the solar eclipse on January 8, 2847, the solar eclipse on February 6, 2847, the solar eclipse on July 3, 2847, the solar eclipse on December 28, 2847, the solar eclipse on June 22, 2848, the solar eclipse on December 16, 2848, the solar eclipse on June 12, 2849, the solar eclipse on December 5, 2849, the solar eclipse on May 3, 2850, the solar eclipse on June 1, 2850, the solar eclipse on October 26, 2850, the solar eclipse on November 24, 2850, the solar eclipse on April 22, 2851, the solar eclipse on October 16, 2851, the solar eclipse on April 10, 2852, the solar eclipse on October 4, 2852, the solar eclipse on March 30, 2853, the solar eclipse on September 24, 2853, the solar eclipse on February 18, 2854, the solar eclipse on March 20, 2854, the solar eclipse on August 15, 2854, the solar eclipse on February 8, 2855, the solar eclipse on August 4, 2855, the solar eclipse on January 28, 2856, the solar eclipse on July 23, 2856, the solar eclipse on January 17, 2857, the solar eclipse on June 13, 2857, the solar eclipse on July 12, 2857, the solar eclipse on December 7, 2857, the solar eclipse on January 6, 2858, the solar eclipse on June 3, 2858, the solar eclipse on November 26, 2858, the solar eclipse on May 23, 2859, the solar eclipse on November 15, 2859, the solar eclipse on May 12, 2860, the solar eclipse on November 4, 2860, the solar eclipse on April 1, 2861, the solar eclipse on May 1, 2861, the solar eclipse on September 25, 2861, the solar eclipse on October 25, 2861, the solar eclipse on March 21, 2862, the solar eclipse on September 15, 2862, the solar eclipse on March 10, 2863, the solar eclipse on September 4, 2863, the solar eclipse on February 28, 2864, the solar eclipse on August 23, 2864, the solar eclipse on January 18, 2865, the solar eclipse on February 17, 2865, the solar eclipse on July 14, 2865, the solar eclipse on January 8, 2866, the solar eclipse on July 3, 2866, the solar eclipse on December 28, 2866, the solar eclipse on June 23, 2867, the solar eclipse on December 17, 2867, the solar eclipse on May 13, 2868, the solar eclipse on June 12, 2868, the solar eclipse on November 5, 2868, the solar eclipse on December 5, 2868, the solar eclipse on May 2, 2869, The solar eclipse on October 26, 2869. The solar eclipse on April 22, 2870. The solar eclipse on October 16, 2870. The solar eclipse on April 11, 2871. The solar eclipse on October 5, 2871. The solar eclipse on February 29, 2872. The solar eclipse on March 30, 2872. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2872. The solar eclipse on September 23, 2872. The solar eclipse on February 18, 2873. The solar eclipse on August 14, 2873. The solar eclipse on February 8, 2874. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2874. The solar eclipse on January 28, 2875. The solar eclipse on July 24, 2875. The solar eclipse on December 18, 2875. The solar eclipse on January 17, 2876. The solar eclipse on June 13, 2876. The solar eclipse on December 6, 2876. The solar eclipse on June 3, 2877. The solar eclipse on November 26, 2877. The solar eclipse on May 23, 2878. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2878. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2879. The solar eclipse on May 12, 2879. The solar eclipse on October 7, 2879. The solar eclipse on November 5, 2879. The solar eclipse on March 31, 2880. The solar eclipse on September 25, 2880. The solar eclipse on March 21, 2881. The solar eclipse on September 14, 2881. The solar eclipse on March 10, 2882. The solar eclipse on September 3, 2882. The solar eclipse on January 30, 2883. The solar eclipse on February 28, 2883. The solar eclipse on July 25, 2883. The solar eclipse on August 23, 2883. The solar eclipse on January 19, 2884. The solar eclipse on July 14, 2884. The solar eclipse on January 7, 2885. The solar eclipse on July 3, 2885. The solar eclipse on December 27, 2885. The solar eclipse on May 25, 2886. The solar eclipse on June 23, 2886. The solar eclipse on November 17, 2886. The solar eclipse on December 16, 2886. The solar eclipse on May 14, 2887. The solar eclipse on November 6, 2887. The solar eclipse on May 2, 2888. The solar eclipse on October 26, 2888. The solar eclipse on April 21, 2889. The solar eclipse on October 15, 2889. The solar eclipse on March 12, 2890. The solar eclipse on April 10, 2890. The solar eclipse on September 5, 2890. The solar eclipse on October 5, 2890. The solar eclipse on March 1, 2891. The solar eclipse on August 25, 2891. The solar eclipse on February 19, 2892. The solar eclipse on August 13, 2892. The solar eclipse on February 7, 2893. The solar eclipse on August 3, 2893. The solar eclipse on December 29, 2893. The solar eclipse on January 28, 2894. The solar eclipse on June 24, 2894. The solar eclipse on December 18, 2894. The solar eclipse on June 14, 2895. The solar eclipse on December 7, 2895. The solar eclipse on June 2, 2896. The solar eclipse on November 26, 2896. The solar eclipse on April 23, 2897. The solar eclipse on May 22, 2897. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2897. The solar eclipse on November 15, 2897. The solar eclipse on April 12, 2898. The solar eclipse on October 6, 2898. The solar eclipse on April 1, 2899. The solar eclipse on September 26, 2899. The solar eclipse on March 22, 2900. The solar eclipse on September 15, 2900. The solar eclipse on February 10, 2901. The solar eclipse on March 11, 2901. the solar eclipse on August 5, 2901, the solar eclipse on September 4, 2901, the solar eclipse on January 30, 2902, the solar eclipse on July 26, 2902, the solar eclipse on January 19, 2903, the solar eclipse on July 16, 2903, the solar eclipse on January 8, 2904, the solar eclipse on June 5, 2904, the solar eclipse on July 4, 2904, the solar eclipse on November 28, 2904, the solar eclipse on December 28, 2904, the solar eclipse on May 25, 2905, the solar eclipse on November 18, 2905, the solar eclipse on May 14, 2906, the solar eclipse on November 7, 2906, the solar eclipse on May 3, 2907, the solar eclipse on October 28, 2907, the solar eclipse on March 23, 2908, the solar eclipse on April 22, 2908, the solar eclipse on September 16, 2908, the solar eclipse on October 16, 2908, the solar eclipse on March 13, 2909, the solar eclipse on September 5, 2909, the solar eclipse on March 2, 2910, the solar eclipse on August 26, 2910, the solar eclipse on February 20, 2911, the solar eclipse on August 15, 2911, the solar eclipse on February 9, 2912, the solar eclipse on July 6, 2912, the solar eclipse on August 4, 2912, the solar eclipse on December 29, 2912, the solar eclipse on June 25, 2913, the solar eclipse on December 18, 2913, the solar eclipse on June 15, 2914, the solar eclipse on December 8, 2914, the solar eclipse on June 4, 2915, the solar eclipse on October 29, 2915, the solar eclipse on November 28, 2915, the solar eclipse on April 23, 2916, the solar eclipse on October 18, 2916, the solar eclipse on April 12, 2917, the solar eclipse on October 7, 2917, the solar eclipse on April 2, 2918, the solar eclipse on September 26, 2918, the solar eclipse on February 21, 2919, the solar eclipse on March 23, 2919, the solar eclipse on August 17, 2919, the solar eclipse on September 15, 2919, the solar eclipse on February 11, 2920, the solar eclipse on August 5, 2920, the solar eclipse on January 30, 2921, the solar eclipse on July 26, 2921, the solar eclipse on January 19, 2922, the solar eclipse on July 16, 2922, the solar eclipse on December 9, 2922, the solar eclipse on January 8, 2923, the solar eclipse on June 5, 2923, the solar eclipse on November 29, 2923, the solar eclipse on May 24, 2924, the solar eclipse on November 18, 2924, the solar eclipse on May 13, 2925, the solar eclipse on November 7, 2925, the solar eclipse on April 3, 2926, the solar eclipse on May 3, 2926, the solar eclipse on September 28, 2926, the solar eclipse on October 27, 2926, the solar eclipse on March 24, 2927, the solar eclipse on September 17, 2927, the solar eclipse on March 13, 2928, the solar eclipse on September 5, 2928, the solar eclipse on March 2, 2929, the solar eclipse on August 25, 2929, the solar eclipse on February 19, 2930, the solar eclipse on July 17, 2930, the solar eclipse on August 15, 2930, the solar eclipse on January 9, 2931, the solar eclipse on July 6, 2931, the solar eclipse on December 30, 2931, the solar eclipse on June 25, 2932, the solar eclipse on December 18, 2932, the solar eclipse on June 14, 2933, the solar eclipse on November 9, 2933, the solar eclipse on December 8, 2933, the solar eclipse on May 4, 2934, the solar eclipse on October 29, 2934, the solar eclipse on April 24, 2935, the solar eclipse on October 18, 2935, the solar eclipse on April 12, 2936, the solar eclipse on October 6, 2936, the solar eclipse on March 4, 2937, the solar eclipse on April 2, 2937, the solar eclipse on August 27, 2937, the solar eclipse on September 25, 2937, the solar eclipse on February 21, 2938, the solar eclipse on August 16, 2938, the solar eclipse on February 10, 2939, the solar eclipse on August 6, 2939, the solar eclipse on January 30, 2940, the solar eclipse on July 26, 2940, the solar eclipse on December 20, 2940, the solar eclipse on January 18, 2941, the solar eclipse on June 16, 2941, the solar eclipse on December 9, 2941, the solar eclipse on June 5, 2942, the solar eclipse on November 29, 2942, the solar eclipse on May 25, 2943, the solar eclipse on November 18, 2943, the solar eclipse on April 14, 2944, the solar eclipse on May 13, 2944, the solar eclipse on November 7, 2944, the solar eclipse on April 3, 2945, the solar eclipse on September 27, 2945, the solar eclipse on March 24, 2946, the solar eclipse on September 16, 2946, the solar eclipse on March 13, 2947, the solar eclipse on September 6, 2947, the solar eclipse on March 2, 2948, the solar eclipse on July 27, 2948, the solar eclipse on August 25, 2948, the solar eclipse on January 20, 2949, the solar eclipse on July 17, 2949, the solar eclipse on January 9, 2950, the solar eclipse on July 6, 2950, the solar eclipse on December 30, 2950, the solar eclipse on June 25, 2951, the solar eclipse on November 20, 2951, the solar eclipse on December 19, 2951, the solar eclipse on May 15, 2952, the solar eclipse on November 8, 2952, the solar eclipse on May 4, 2953, the solar eclipse on October 28, 2953, the solar eclipse on April 24, 2954, the solar eclipse on October 17, 2954, the solar eclipse on March 15, 2955, the solar eclipse on April 13, 2955, the solar eclipse on September 7, 2955, the solar eclipse on October 7, 2955, the solar eclipse on March 3, 2956, the solar eclipse on August 27, 2956, the solar eclipse on February 20, 2957, the solar eclipse on August 16, 2957, the solar eclipse on February 9, 2958, the solar eclipse on August 6, 2958, the solar eclipse on December 31, 2958, the solar eclipse on January 30, 2959, the solar eclipse on June 27, 2959, the solar eclipse on December 21, 2959, the solar eclipse on June 15, 2960, the solar eclipse on December 9, 2960, the solar eclipse on June 4, 2961, the solar eclipse on November 29, 2961, the solar eclipse on April 25, 2962, the solar eclipse on May 24, 2962, the solar eclipse on November 18, 2962, the solar eclipse on April 15, 2963, the solar eclipse on October 8, 2963, the solar eclipse on April 3, 2964, the solar eclipse on September 27, 2964, the solar eclipse on March 24, 2965, the solar eclipse on September 16, 2965, the solar eclipse on March 13, 2966, the solar eclipse on August 7, 2966, the solar eclipse on September 6, 2966, the solar eclipse on January 31, 2967, The solar eclipse on July 28, 2967. The solar eclipse on 20 January. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2968. The solar eclipse on July 16, 2968. The solar eclipse on January 9, 2969. The solar eclipse on July 5, 2969. The solar eclipse on November 30, 2969. The solar eclipse on December 30, 2969. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2970. The solar eclipse on November 20, 2970. The solar eclipse on May 15, 2971. The solar eclipse on November 9, 2971. The solar eclipse on May 4, 2972. The solar eclipse on October 28, 2972. The solar eclipse on March 25, 2973. The solar eclipse on April 24, 2973. The solar eclipse on September 17, 2973. The solar eclipse on October 17, 2973. The solar eclipse on March 15, 2974. The solar eclipse on September 7, 2974. The solar eclipse on March 4, 2975. The solar eclipse on August 28, 2975. The solar eclipse on February 21, 2976. The solar eclipse on August 16, 2976. The solar eclipse on January 10, 2977. The solar eclipse on February 9, 2977. The solar eclipse on July 7, 2977. The solar eclipse on December 31, 2977. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2978. The solar eclipse on December 21, 2978. The solar eclipse on June 15, 2979. The solar eclipse on December 10, 2979. The solar eclipse on May 5, 2980. The solar eclipse on June 4, 2980. The solar eclipse on November 28, 2980. The solar eclipse on April 25, 2981. The solar eclipse on October 19, 2981. The solar eclipse on April 15, 2982. The solar eclipse on October 8, 2982. The solar eclipse on April 4, 2983. The solar eclipse on September 27, 2983. The solar eclipse on March 23, 2984. The solar eclipse on August 18, 2984. The solar eclipse on September 16, 2984. The solar eclipse on February 11, 2985. The solar eclipse on August 7, 2985. The solar eclipse on January 31, 2986. The solar eclipse on July 28, 2986. The solar eclipse on January 20, 2987. The solar eclipse on July 17, 2987. The solar eclipse on December 12, 2987. The solar eclipse on January 10, 2988. The solar eclipse on June 5, 2988. The solar eclipse on November 30, 2988. The solar eclipse on May 26, 2989. The solar eclipse on November 19, 2989. The solar eclipse on May 15, 2990. The solar eclipse on November 8, 2990. The solar eclipse on April 6, 2991. The solar eclipse on May 5, 2991. The solar eclipse on September 29, 2991. The solar eclipse on October 28, 2991. The solar eclipse on March 25, 2992. The solar eclipse on September 17, 2992. The solar eclipse on March 14, 2993. The solar eclipse on September 7, 2993. The solar eclipse on March 3, 2994. The solar eclipse on August 28, 2994. The solar eclipse on January 22, 2995. The solar eclipse on February 20, 2995. The solar eclipse on July 18, 2995. The solar eclipse on August 17, 2995. The solar eclipse on January 11, 2996. The solar eclipse on July 6, 2996. The solar eclipse on December 31, 2996. The solar eclipse on June 26, 2997. The solar eclipse on December 20, 2997. The solar eclipse on June 15, 2998. The solar eclipse on December 10, 2998. The solar eclipse on May 6, 2999. The solar eclipse on October 30, 2999. The solar eclipse on April 26, 3000. and the solar eclipse on October 19, 3000. Luckily, Jacob Harrington, not to be confused by me, Jacob Harrington Koopa, which was created by Koopa12121 on May 15, 2020, is not going to make it either the third or fourth quarters of the 21st century, the 22nd century, the 23rd century, the 24th century, the 25th century, the 26th century, the 27th century, the 28th century, the 29th century, and the 30th century due to his lifespan. And also, the first quarter of the 21st century is from January 1, 2001 to December 31, 2024, the second quarter of the 21st century is from January 1, 2025 to December 31, 2049, the third quarter of the 21st century is from January 1, 2051 to December 31, 2074, the fourth quarter of the 21st century is from January 1, 2075 to December 31, 2100, the 22nd century is from January 1, 2101 to December 31, 2200, the 23rd century is from January 1, 2201 to December 31, 2300, the 24th century is from January 1, 2301 to December 31, 2400, the 25th century is from January 1, 2401 to December 31, 2500, the 26th century is from January 1, 2501 to December 31, 2600, the 27th century is from January 1, 2601 to December 31, 2700, the 28th century is from January 1, 2701 to December 31, 2800, the 29th century is from January 1, 2801 to December 31, 2900, and the 30th century is from January 1, 2901 to December 31, 3000. Every century could be divided in halves, or quarters. Half a century is equal to 50 years and quarter of a century is equal to 25 years. Stay tuned for update number 21 on Mario Kart Tour.